Creating content is uncomfortable. You put yourself into your podcast, your book, your video, hit publish, and release it into the world to be judged. We hope that people will watch, enjoy, and be inspired to change their lives for the better. And we hope we can build our audiences and move them to action at the same time. And all of that does not happen when we play small, we hold back, or make decisions based on fear. Sometimes we get in our head and can be our own worst enemy when it comes to time to serve. What if in those moments, when it's hard to show up authentically, to do the work, or demand excellence from ourselves to deliver, we had an unshakable belief in ourselves, in our content, and our ability to change lives? That's what we are discussing in today's episode of Creators That Crush with guest Carlos Garcia. Carlos is a certified Army resiliency coach and an expert in helping you embrace the suck to do the things that will make you successful as a creator and in your business. And in today's episode, we're going to talk about how a simple personal constitution clarifies what you want in the world, and why physical and mental reps train your nervous system to not respond to that uncomfortable feeling, and how to use an exposure ladder to turn fear into fuel. Stick around to hear the intentional embarrassment drill that rewires stage fright into confidence, and a step-by-step plan you can use to apply the ladder to your life. This is the Creators That Crush podcast, the show that helps you move from crushed to crushing it as a creator. I am your host and high-performance coach, Shawn Buttner, and resilience and dealing with those uncomfortable feelings that come up when you create things and when you market yourself and your ideas is essential to being successful as a creator in business and in life. So this is a really important episode. I hope you love it, and we'll jump right into it. Hey, Carlos, welcome to the Creators That Crush podcast. I'm so glad that you're here.
Hi, Shawn. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. So we were talking before on our pre-call about the fear of other people's opinions and resilience and how this relates to creators. So I wanted to start out, can you tell a story of when you were experiencing or having a problem with other people's opinions and how that impacted your creative work or professional work and what you did to move through it?
So I had a lot of problems growing up with imposter syndrome, or feeling like an imposter, feeling like I wasn't good enough, and many different situations. And this feeling of not feeling good enough, it was from the beginning. I mean, high school, college, even through law school. And I realized that it was something deeper than just feeling like I wasn't good enough. It was something else, actually. And it was this fear of being in the spotlight. Because if you think about it, when you're feeling like an imposter, it's vis-a-vis other people around you, right? And if there's nobody around you, you're not really going to feel like an imposter, because there's nobody. You're not comparing yourself to other people. And so that led me to understand that it's whenever I was in the spotlight, or whenever there was a risk of failing or a risk of being judged, that's when the anxiety for me would get triggered. Because we all, as human beings, have this innate desire to feel like we belong. Like we want to be a part of a group of people, we want to be liked. But I took that to an extreme, to where I was doing things to be liked. I was avoiding things out of fear of being negatively evaluated or judged. And so I avoided opportunities where I would potentially be in a situation where I would fail. And then I didn't want to do that because I didn't want to be judged, right? And so what happened over time was I stayed in my comfort zone and avoided doing things that potentially would be a failure for me. And I only did things that would confirm my competence. And as you may know, that the implications or consequences of that is you stay in your comfort zone. You're not really growing. You're not testing yourself. You're not stretching yourself. And so I realized that in my life, it was an accumulation of things, really, avoiding opportunities, of not getting after it. And so I needed to reverse engineer that and look at my life and figure out a way on how I could get after it, how I could stop avoiding things and start charging towards them despite any fear or stress or anxiety.
I think I definitely have felt that way before. And as someone that makes content and he puts it on the internet, like that's a whole really like interesting thing to do, because the flaming arrows of the internet, like whoever you are, whatever you believe in, whatever you like, there's going to be people that don't like that and they'll judge you for that. So I'm curious then, like, how do you stand in your own, kind of like power? You know, how do you own that part of like, I believe in this. I created this thing that's very personal to me. I'm sharing it with the world. You know, how do you stand in that and not cave to that very human instinct of people are going to judge me. I'm afraid that, you know, I'm going to make a big mistake and fail and all the things that come along with what you were just talking about.
For me, it started with figuring out what I didn't want. After a while, you start to, through experiences that you go through and asking yourself the right questions, and through process of elimination, you start to learn what's important to you and what you value, what you want your purpose to be, what you want your story to be about in this world, in this short life that we have. And once you figure that out, once you write down that or identify that personal constitution of yours, then you got to figure out a way, okay, how do I live in line with that? Often we're living other people's lives. We're living other people's version of what success means, and we don't realize it until we actually take a step back from the daily grind and figure out what it is that we're doing. What are we chasing? Why are we chasing it? And so for me, I had to learn that. I had to actually sit down and write down my personal constitution and then implement that through daily actions. And for me, what that looked like was a combination of building myself physically and building myself mentally. Physically meaning pushing my body in increasingly stressful ways. So whether it's running long distances or doing combat sports or just regular exercise. And then the mental conditioning part for me was teaching my mind that there's nothing to fear in those situations that I was always fearing. So whether it was public speaking or being in the spotlight and having eyeballs on you, or people judging you for whatever reason, or having those difficult conversations you don't want to have, or leading in a different, or in whatever way you lead, whether it's in your job or in a side hustle you're doing, putting myself in those situations and training my mind to be calm in those situations. That's kind of the big picture.
So it's finding that challenge line physically and finding that challenge line mentally, where you might avoid doing the marathon, you might avoid having that hard conversation with a coworker, friend, or whatnot, and pushing through it in a way that that helps you move forward one way or the other.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's pushing yourself. It's creating, and these challenges or experiences are just vehicles to create proof and evidence to yourself that you are able and capable of doing increasingly difficult things.
I know in my life, I've run a couple of marathons, and that first time, like training for a marathon, where I'm like, I have to run 7 miles this week. I've never run 7 miles for my long run ever. And you accomplish it and you're like, wow, okay, I did that. That's a whole like new thing for me. Now next week I got to do 8, you know, and that escalation of wins was like, oh, I can do really hard physical things that hurt and like figure my way through it in a way that's not embarrassing, you know. And then you're more confident at work all of a sudden because you have that other source of confidence to kind of pull from.
It's more, for me at least, it's more about numbing myself against adversity when it happens. And for me, it does. Whenever I'm training for an ultra race, for example, man, like it sucks to train for an ultra because you're just away on the weekends. They're always running. But then when things I've seen happen in my job, I'm like, I just kind of shrug my shoulders. I'm like, okay, whatever. It doesn't, you don't get shook, you don't get shaken as much because you're just doing something that sucks,
Yeah. It's that an unshakable belief in yourself that you can get through things, whether it's, important or not, or painful or not, or, hard or not, that, the more evidence you can build for yourself and doing marathons and winning like jiu-jitsu tournaments or, writing your first book, that could be really taxing mentally, trying to figure that out and stick with it to make it good. These are all kinds of different areas that when another problem presents itself, you're like, okay, I got this. Like, it might be terrible for a moment, but I get through it and it's better on the other side. And like, then looking back, I'm not sure if you found this, but you kind of romanticize like, oh, I did that really tough thing. And like, that was really awesome. And maybe it's that self-defense mechanism in your brain where it's like, it wasn't that hard. And then you do it again. You're like, oh I remember. This hurts.
Yeah, no, this hurts. Yeah, no, I completely understand. Yeah, I think there are different levels to it. Like the ultra running, that produces in me different sort of emotions like boredom, impatience, frustration. So you're training, it depends on the activity too that you're training for, that you're desensitizing yourself to. Like, boredom, frustration, anger, impatience, those are emotions that I think many entrepreneurs suffer from, and they let those emotions get the best of them, and then they quit early, or they don't even try, or they don't stay with it long enough. And I think ultra running is a perfect way to practice being a successful entrepreneur, because ultra running is about just running long distance and being with yourself and your thoughts and your emotions, being bored as hell, and patient. Like, Sunday comes around and you need to do that 3-hour run or whatever it is, and you're really not looking forward to it, and so you just become, it's almost like this impatience that then triggers anxiety in you, because you're like, man, I want this to be over, and it's still not over, And then you have other things that are like, you have fear, fears like anxiety-based fear, like public speaking or putting yourself out there, or, whether it's on social media or physically in person at some event. And for those things, you have to practice doing that, I have found. Right? If you want to be a great public speaker, you need to public speak, but not just in front of a mirror. You got to do it with some adrenaline. You got to do it with some stress. You need to feel that. Because the reason why we don't perform like we want to perform when eyeballs are on us is because we have that anxiety getting in the way of our prefrontal cortex, that thinking part of our brain. That's the reason, right? Because if you do it in front of a mirror, you're the most confident human being, right? Or you do it in front of your partner, you're super confident. But the reason why you're not is because you got that anxiety kicking in, that fight or flight, and your amygdala. So you gotta tame that. And the way you tame it, I have found, is by feeling those emotions, so that you understand that there's nothing to fear, right? You get acquainted and familiarized and used to feeling those things, so that you understand you're gonna be okay. You're gonna live. You're gonna be breathing, And if you fail, then you got to tell yourself the right things so that you can get back up. You're not a loser. It's just it's a data point. You got to try again.
Kind of going back in the conversation a little bit. You're talking about your personal constitution. Like, did you write out a bunch of a Bill of Rights and a very powerful statement about the best version of you? Or how did that actually, how was that created? What did it kind of actually look like?
So personal constitution is not something I invented. It's something that I read about from this book that I read many years ago called Leading with Character, written by Jim Lauer, who's a psychologist. He was the former director of the Human Performance Institute, think it's a Jonathan Johnson Performance Institute now. And in that book, he talks about what it is to have character, that everything is about living with character, that character is the key to success in personal, professional life. And the way to implement that and practice building your character is by developing what he calls a personal ethos. I call it a personal constitution. And a personal constitution is, it's sort of like a Bill of Rights, but it's your Bill of Rights. It's what are your core values? What are the things that are important to you? What do you want? What is your purpose, or what do you want your purpose to be? Asking yourself specific questions that help you ponder and reflect and ultimately help you answer that question. What do you want your legacy to be about? What do you want people to say about you when you're gone? What do you want your vision to be? What's your vision? What do you see in the next 5-10 years? Things like that. And then your story. What do you want your story to be? Your story is this: everybody walks around telling themselves, whether they realize it or not, consciously or unconsciously, they tell themselves, they have a story that they tell themselves about themselves. And your personal constitution should have a positive, productive story. And it's, that includes getting real with the current story that you're telling yourself. And if it's not a good one, you need to rewrite that story into a more productive one, a new story that's based on action, that's based on optimism. And then backing up your personal constitution with action, right? And the way you do that is through the physical conditioning, through the mental conditioning, creating those identity expanding experiences that get seared into your subconscious, so that you remember that, and you put it into your long-term memory, so you remember it. And you can write it down, obviously. But that's the personal constitution for me. It's something that I have been reviewing pretty much every day for the past several years. And it's a way to focus your thoughts and focus your actions and prioritize and keep your eye on on what's important. Because in a world where everybody's trying to steal your attention, you need to figure out a way to stay focused. Yeah, you have all these apps, right, that lock your screen and lock your iPhone. Yeah, but you have the password. You can always just click and go back into your screens, right? And I think it takes something deeper than that to be motivated by something deeper. And that for me is just reviewing those things that keep me focused. Yeah.
I guess, like, for people listening, if they were to do this exercise for themselves and ask themselves, what kind of role model do I want to be? What's the vision for my life? Everything that you were asking yourself. When do you, I guess, know that it's time to shift? Is it just like a feeling that, hey, this doesn't feel true to me? How do you realize it's not your brain trying to trick you to make it easier for yourself? Because we're humans and that'll happen. How do you handle changes, or when to change or when to revise versus just follow the plan?
Yeah, I think it depends on the experiences I'm having. Sometimes I'll do certain things, like I'll go for a run, and then I'll start thinking about things that I haven't really thought about. Or I'll just have different experiences in my work or in my life that expand my perspective on things or make me see things in a different light. And that's when I'll usually go into my personal constitution and make some modifications. And I also schedule it like once a quarter to actually sit down and review the questions that help you reflect on each of the components of that personal constitution, so you can think about it again and see if you come to the same answers after, a few months of looking at it.
Yeah, I imagine too, it's some of it you have to like try and live it, like sometimes you're going to think, hey, this is what I want for myself. And you start going down that path and you're like, actually, but I had this romanticized idea of what this was, and the reality is completely not the thing. So again, that action, learning through action, that, every plan kind of meets its fate when it hits, when you actually have to act on it. And then you're like, oh, maybe there's a different, better, like more efficient way to do this, or whatever that is for you.
Yeah, completely agree. Like you will write things on paper, and then we're like, okay, we start doing it and we're like, okay, this is completely different from what I thought it would be. And it's not for me, So, like you said, is we have this romanticized perspective on how things are, but when we actually start doing it, it's a completely different story.
Hey, it's Shawn. Before we get back into this episode of Creators That Crush, I wanted to invite you to a free 30-minute call if you are struggling with creative burnout, with confidence, with trying to make progress on your creative endeavor. And so on this call, we'll spend 30 minutes talking about one of your big goals or aspirations, or we'll talk about something you're struggling with. And the whole goal of the call is to get you moving with some personalized habits or tips. And so I just want to interact with people. And that's why I'm inviting you on this free call. So if that is interesting to you, please go to ShawnButtner.com and you'll see a button right at the top of the page called Schedule My 30-Minute Call. We'll get it all set up and we can help you start to progress again. We can help you go from crushed to crushing it as a content creator. So with that, scope that out and we'll get back to the episode. How do you determine the things that are worthy being anxious and worried about, right? So obviously 99% of the things in our life day to day aren't like super threatening, but you're walking on a trail, you see the bear. That's a good thing to be worried about and anxious about and like paying attention to. So how does your approach kind of help you address the things that are actually like worth the worry, worth the anxiety, worth the fear of, I guess?
I think everybody has ambition, but unconsciously it's quenched through fear and anxiety, if that makes any sense. So they don't think about things in the first place because their anxiety is so much that they don't see themselves doing that thing. They want to get there, but they don't know how to. The anxiety is just debilitating. And that's where I come in and help them overcome that anxiety. And like to answer specifically your question, when do you realize that it's something worth like worrying about? What's that? Well, I mean, if it's something that you know is going to advance your career, like a promotion, or you know you're getting more points, you're getting a higher salary, or you're getting that position that you wanted, or that leadership position, or you finally want to do storytelling or stand-up comedy, for example, but you can't seem to get there because the stage fright is too much, or you just can't do it. You know, that's, I think, makes reasonable sense as to when you should be worried about it, because you're not getting, you know you want it, but you're not doing it. And then you figure out what's in the middle, what's the thing stopping it? Well, it's the anxiety, right? But we're talking about like if it's in the professional, in the workplace, and you want to advance in your career, and you're not doing it because of the anxiety, then I think that's worth worrying about, right?
So maybe switching gears a little bit. I know for me in my coaching practice, people hire me to help them beat what's normal results are. You know, whatever is normal, their baseline. A lot of times they're stuck. And a lot of times it is these types of different fears that come up. Do you have like a common set of struggles that you encounter with your clients that you kind of see more universally? And it's like, oh, you just have to, everyone has a fear of public speaking, and that's something I have to address. Or, you know, what is that maybe like broader list of things that you encounter in your business?
Yeah, I would say it's about three things that keep showing up. The first is over preparation, and said another way, they come in saying, oh, they're a perfectionist, but really they just fear making mistakes, so they over prepare and try to make things perfect. The second one is overthinking and hesitating and having all this negative, counterproductive thinking that just takes so much mental real estate space. And the third one is a trust issue, a courage. People have a hard time. We're wired for self-preservation. And so what that means is that it's not natural for us to open up and risk being, ridiculed or made fun of. Like, we're not willing to risk being vulnerable because we fear being judged. And what happens with that is that we can't build trust with one another. Building relationships 101 is about trust building, right? That's like the foundation. You got to build trust. And so people they have problems leading a well-oiled team because they're not taking the initiative many times as a leader by encouraging trust building. As a leader, you have to take the initiative. You have to make yourself vulnerable, and they don't. And so what happens is that you have your teammates who are just playing politics and whispering and saying yes to everything, but behind closed doors, they don't agree with you at all. And it becomes a very toxic team that's not really performing at its best. So over preparation, overthinking, lack of trust, which is connected to the fear of being judged, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
What about you?
I think all of those have the fear of being judged kind of at the base of your perfectionism or overthinking, not making a mistake. Yeah, for me, like the way that I describe it is, most people like have 3 different types of fear. So it's either like a process fear. They fear that by becoming an entrepreneur, it's going to be so difficult that it's going to destroy them and they won't be able to succeed and then be judged and all that stuff. There's a loss failure or a loss fear where kind of like the example of I get promoted, I can't spend time with my family, or that relationship suffers, or an outcome fear where it's like, hey, like if I run a marathon or ultra and I accomplish that, I'm not going to feel good about myself. All the effort, the grass is not going to be greener on the other side. And, why am I even doing this? So those are kind of like the high level buckets. I think it really stems from a fear of being seen. And I think kind of like you've been saying, that I don't want to be seen for who I am, because if I'm seen for who I am, people will judge me. And if I'm judged, I'll be made fun of, or people won't like me. And, that people can't deal with that. So I see that a lot in my clients. I think a fear of success is actually kind of weird, where it's like, if I actually accomplish this, then who am I? Like my identity is so tied to chasing this thing that untangling, getting a YouTube channel with 1 million views, like, I get that. And then like, what am I chasing after that? And so there's a lot of self-sabotage that kind of happens between that.
Yeah. I like how you put the fear of being seen. It's the fear of being in the spotlight, essentially. And I think we take ourselves too serious, and we try to hold on to this image or persona of ourselves because we care too much about what people think. We want people to think of us in a certain way or put us on a pedestal, or like us. And that just is exhausting, because you need to uphold this image now of yourself. And if you don't, people are going to realize you're fake. You've been inauthentic this whole time. And instead of living like that, why not just not attach yourself, like you said, to a title so much, or to a job title, to a color belt, or to your accomplishment so much, but just focus on learning and laughing at yourself as you on the way down, and owning your mistakes too. There's a lot of power in that, because other people can't use that against you, because you're being open about your mistakes and your flaws, and that helps you stay honest, I think.
Yeah, I definitely believe that. And I'm always reminded, I had a manager at my first corporate job pull me aside after I did a complete bit, updated a database that was down for 3 days. It was terrible. It was just data, but it was costing the company millions of dollars every minute it was down. So it was really bad. And he pulled me aside and he goes, hey, that was a big mistake, right? And actually that means you're trying hard enough to do things and experiment and learn, which is good. And he's like, if this happens again, it'll be a problem. And so, making the same mistake over and over and over again is kind of something to pay attention to. But if you're making new mistakes constantly, that's just part of your growth. And almost any of those mistakes, in most situations, there are caveats. Doctors probably, you don't want to be in brain surgery and be the learning subject there. But, most things are recoverable. Most things, again, if you're not doing it over and over again, you're becoming a better human, a better employee, a better leader, a better partner through those mistakes. So
For sure, yeah. That's a great example. Yeah. And, also seeing if you're able, like the example you just gave, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Those things are kind of hard to practice, potentially outside the workplace. But when you have to talk or communicate, we make the mistake of trying to shine and be good at that at the workplace, but you got to learn how to do that outside the workplace so that when it's time to shine, you bring that with you, because you have a reputation to keep as well to a certain extent.
So curious then, you have a program, Inner Fortress program. If we were to leave people with something they can do to work on their confidence, to work on overcoming their fears or the things that are holding them back from higher success, is there something from that particular program or another piece of advice that you would have for them in order to help them go from struggling and being held back to breaking through and crushing it?
Yeah, I would say it's very practical, and a very effective way is to train your amygdala, which is that fight or flight part in your brain, to be okay and calm when there is stress in different situations. Because when you're able to do that, then that thinking part of your brain can think. Then you can think clearly, then you can use your intuition, then you can be creative, then you can think on your feet, then you can put forth your best self in specific situations. So if you're feeling a lack of confidence in situations that are where you want to shine and you're not able to do that, it starts with desensitizing yourself to the stress surrounding the situations that you fear in the first place. So how you can do that is by working backwards, figuring out the situations that cause anxiety and the fear, and then creating challenges for yourself that mimic those situations, and practicing those challenges with increasing pressure and adrenaline and stress so that you become desensitized to those situations. And over time, you will learn to shine. It's a very effective, accelerated learning technique to do this. That's what I could say about that.
Okay. Could you provide an example from maybe a client you've worked with on something that they were hitting, bumping up against, and how you kind of broke it down for that kind of exposure therapy type thing, or the exposure to the fear?
Yeah. So recently with one client who we'll call her Stacy, and she is a manager, and she wanted to become a director level leader. But she kept coming to an impasse where she, as a director, she needed to start delivering more impromptu presentations and having more impromptu meetings with higher leadership, as well as with more employees that she would be in charge with. So there was this fear of being in the spotlight, right? And being able to speak in an impromptu manner, and being able to take questions on the spot, and being able to think on your feet without heavy preparation, right? Without that over preparation. And so those were the pain points that she had. And so what we did was reverse engineer that, is first work on her physical conditioning and really stress test her on a physical level, because you have to understand that physical conditioning, physical exercise, running, etc., it's a perfect crucible to learn how to manage your thoughts and your emotions, because by engaging in rigorous physical activity, you are going to trigger negative thoughts or counterproductive thoughts and emotions. And then what we do is we give clients tools or protocols to learn how to manage those thoughts and emotions. And it's a good exercise so that when that happens at the workplace, they're able to use those techniques under pressure because they've done it on the physical side. And physical conditioning also because it takes away many of the variables that are found in the workplace because it's just you and the exercise, right? You don't have to worry about other people. It's just your thoughts and emotions. And then the mental conditioning piece is where we get very creative with mimicking the situations that are the cause of the fear in the first place. So we'll do a lot of creative things with that. And one of the things we do is intentional embarrassment exercises where we put people in potentially embarrassing situations where they may feel a bit of humiliation or rejection, right? Because that's the thing that makes people avoid often, right? Is that those feelings of rejection and humiliation. So we put them through some exercises on that, like real life exercises with people outside the workplace, obviously. And we increase the stress level as well, right? It starts with like level 1, 2 challenges, and then it goes up. It goes all the way up to like level 9, 10. And then after a while, after they do the level 9, 10 discovery challenges, they eventually get desensitized and it goes down again to like a 3, 1 to 3, 1 to 4.
Okay. And, so like embarrassment, is it like wearing a funny hat and like ordering coffee, or like how do you facilitate that? I'm just super curious. That sounds kind of fun in a weird way, but
yeah, it's fun. You know, I do it myself like every so often. Like last time, for example, I was at a store and, just going up to people and asking them to record me as I sing, so stuff like that, or going up to a coffee shop and making an announcement or saying something or spilling water on yourself on purpose so that people can like see you, doing these socially awkward blunders essentially in front of other people. And training your amygdala, right? Training your amygdala and realizing that nothing happened, that you're still breathing, that you're okay, right? And being okay with looking silly, being okay with looking foolish, and learning to not take yourself so seriously and changing your mindset into like a learning mindset and challenge mindset, seeing anxiety as a good thing, as a challenge, not as a threat to yourself. And when you shift that mindset, you're able to see problems as challenges rather than threats, where you get all defensive and you start, going into panic mode.
Yeah, I really like that. I had a job that I worked at where anything that wasn't a problem was an opportunity. And I'm kind of hearing that and what you're explaining, and like you have an opportunity to prove something to yourself, to not die in this situation, to persevere, and have that evidence that you're awesome. Right.
That's exactly
awesome.
right. That's exactly that. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So starting to wrap up here, is there anything you found really surprising or something you've really loved in helping your clients through, building resilience and not paying attention to that awkwardness?
Yeah. I would say it's the dialogue that they have with themselves. Because one of the things we make them do is write down their dialogue before they go into an event and after, and then seeing over time how that dialogue changes. It becomes a very productive and fun and confident dialogue with themselves. And seeing that trajectory is awesome and then you hear it when you're talking to them in their voice. They feel invigorated. They feel more alive. Because they start to learn that, okay, these things become like they actually be fun, like a game. You got to see it as a game almost, right? And yeah, feeling that sense, because after you overcome something that's difficult, you feel that pleasure, right? You feel that sense of, that sense of ease. But then you also feel invigorated because you did something difficult. You feel alive. Your perspective gets expanded. Your self-perception, you have a new self-perception. You see new possibilities of what's possible after you humiliated yourself and realize it's okay. you know?
Right on.
So
Any last thoughts for content creators on building resilience that maybe we haven't covered that I should have asked you about or might be helpful?
I think it's understanding what you really want. And then once you understand that, throwing away the key or swallowing it and, not looking for a plan B, only your plan A, and manifesting it and reviewing that personal constitution that you and I were talking about and staying focused on that if that's what you really want.
Right on. Okay, final question I always ask people is, what did you love about our discussion today?
I think we have a lot of things in common with the not taking yourself so seriously part, and how people just need to realize that is a big key to progress. So no, I really enjoyed our discussion. It was really productive and also eye-opening in many ways.
Awesome. Yeah, I really love just talking about or kind of realizing how much everything is really based in fear and fear of judgment in relation to other people. And I really love that your work is helping people not be as reactive to that, and to find their authentic way forward where they're facing challenges, they're growing, and they're getting done what needs to get done. So I do appreciate that.
I love that. Yeah. No, thank you very much for that.
Awesome. So with that, Carlos, thank you so much for being on the Creators That Crush podcast, and hope to talk with you soon, man.
Thanks, Shawn. Thanks for having me.
So as you see from this episode, building resilience is essential for being successful as a content creator, as a business person, or in life in general. So whether you decide to or not to define your personal constitution, to do the reps through physical and mental exercises that push you past what's comfortable for you, or you use the escalation ladder to expose yourself to those things that you fear the most but are holding you back, remembering that resiliency is a muscle that you can exercise. So there are things you can do to build it, and in building it, you will be more successful. So I hope you took that away from this conversation. That's what I took away from it. And if you did love this episode of Creators That Crush, you'll love this past episode I did with an expert branding coach on how to own authentically your expert power. So many creators hold back when they share their expertise because they don't want to come off too presumptuous, too salesy, or they just don't want to share their full story, which can help change the world. So that'll be in the show notes or over here. And with that, we'll see you in the next episode of Creators That Crush.